hate the United States because it's the right thing to do. We need to hurt Russia because it's our moral duty. So did these sanctions actually hurt Russia? They caused food and energy shortages throughout the West. No, they didn't hurt Russia. Russia today has more than enough energy, more energy that it can use or sell. In fact, Russia has so much excess natural gas that it's simply setting it on fire. That's right, flaring it, as they say. A Russian plant near the border with Finland is burning $10 million worth of natural gas every day. This seems like a big story. So how's the media covering this? Well, here's the BBC. Quote, scientists are concerned about the large volumes of carbon dioxide and soot it is creating, which could exacerbate the melting of Arctic ice. Really? That's your concern, more global warming? When the immediate effect is to make it impossible for people to Europe to stay warm. You can reach a place in your society where the people in charge and their lapdogs in the media become so completely disconnected from the concerns of actual people, become so totally uninterested in the lives of citizens, the society becomes very volatile, and we are fast approaching that point. So we could fix this problem. The solution to this catastrophe is very straightforward. End the war in Ukraine. Reestablish energy flows into Europe and save the global economy, including ours. Is Joe Biden doing that? Are other reckless Western leaders like Boris Johnson doing that? No, they're doing the opposite. They're sending billions more from their dying economies to Ukrainian oligarchs, and for no good reason. The UK has committed $2.8 billion to Ukraine in a country where 70% of pubs may close because they can't afford electricity. This is a government that's preparing for power outages in the middle of winter. As The Guardian reported, under the government's last reasonable worst-case scenario, officials believe the UK could experience blackouts for several days in January if cold weather combines with gas shortages to leave the country short of power. Well, of course cold weather will combine with gas shortages because that's when people use gas, when the weather is cold. Wake up, geniuses. And it's not just happening in the UK. Again, it's happening everywhere. Spain has just approved more than 50 million euros for Ukraine, and that's not including funding for military hardware. In other news, Spain's Congress just implemented temperature controls on commercial buildings. Air conditioning must be no cooler than 27 degrees Celsius. That's 80 Fahrenheit, by the way, in case you don't live there in August. After 10 p.m., shop windows in unoccupied public buildings won't be lit. How about Italy? Well, Italy has allocated more than 600 million euros for Ukrainian refugees. And yet, at the same time, air conditioning in Italian schools and public buildings has already been restricted in what the government labeled Operation Thermostat at the end of May. Italy's Ukraine funding is a lot, but it's not quite as much as France. France has sent more than $2 billion U.S. to Ukraine. And at the same time, France is fining shopkeepers for keeping their doors open and running their air conditioning so we can send more weapons to one of the most corrupt governments in the world. In France, illuminated signs are banned from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. For our part, the United States has sent more than $10 billion in military. That's 19 packages of weapons to what Mitch McConnell tells us is the most important thing in the world. Congress has approved more than $30 billion in additional spending. So how is all that spending working? Yeah, are we winning the war in Ukraine? Have we bankrupted Vladimir Putin like Joe Biden claimed we would? The ruble just hit a 7-year high against the U.S. dollar in June. Take a look at this chart comparing the Russian ruble against the euro. Russia's doing well. Europe is not doing well at all. Now Joe Biden is calling for an unconditional surrender from Vladimir Putin. Here's the weird thing. By any actual reality-based measure, Vladimir Putin is not losing the war in Ukraine. He is winning the war in Ukraine. And Joe Biden looks at that and says, we won't stop until you proffer an unconditional surrender. This isn't bad policy. This is not. The goal is to completely destroy the West in order to make way for Chinese global dominance. What would be the other explanation for this behavior? Retired Army Colonel Doug McGregor joins us tonight to assess all of this. So Doug, I'm just wondering, This war has consequences not simply for the Ukrainians and the Russian government, but for the West more broadly, our country and particularly Europe. Do the people who make the decisions in Washington about how long to extend this war factor that in?
I think there's an easy answer to that question, Tucker. Absolutely not. There was no careful study or preparation for this policy in any way, shape, or form. And more importantly, the points that you've made should give pause to the ruling elites of Europe and the United States to remember that in 1789, the French Revolution broke out when the people of Paris could no longer afford to buy bread. Well, where are we headed? Are we headed into a position where our own population can't afford to heat itself or care for itself? We can't operate our scientific industrial infrastructure? I think it's a very real challenge, and I think it's going to hit Europe very hard this week.
Populations get radical when their standard of living moves backwards. People think things are getting better, the American dream we used to call it. They're calm, they're hopeful. But when they start sliding in the wrong direction, people, as you just noted, get crazy. Is this a concern for Boris Johnson, Macron, or Joe Biden?
Well, if it isn't a concern for the people in Europe, for the ruling elites there like Macron or Olaf Scholz and others, it should be. Because I think we're going to witness something like that in Europe first before we see it here. And as far as the energy issue, yes, end the war in Ukraine, lift the sanctions against Russia. They're doing far more damage to us than they are to Russia. So that's part of it. But here's the real problem. Certainly since Biden came in, he's done everything in his power to eventually stop the investment of capital in the energy sector. So capital has migrated away from the energy sector. We haven't built a new refinery in the United States since the 1970s. He canceled the Keystone Pipeline. And the problem with those things is that it takes years to build the infrastructure, so you don't see the energy flows improve. And then finally, we've lost touch with another reality. Today, the world is different from what it was 30 or 40 years ago. We have huge populations in India and China, new economies that demand energy.
We are lifetimes away from replacing fossil fuels with so-called green energy. Lifetimes away, globally. And I wish people would be honest about that. Colonel Doug McGregor, I appreciate your coming on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tucker.
So the Biden administration never stopped talking about democracy, democracy, democracy. What does that mean exactly? Well, Biden just wrote off half the American population as dangerous insurgents, in fact, declaring war on his own country right before the midterm. That's straight ahead. So the Biden administration, like Antifa, is very concerned with the existence of something called fascists. But like Antifa, the Biden administration has never defined the term fascist, or really any of the terms it throws around, including equity. So who are these fascists who are threatening our country? Well, of course, anyone who disagrees with Joe Biden is by definition a fascist. And last week, those of us who suspected that was the definition were not surprised to see him define it pretty precisely. And what turned out to be one of the most chilling statements ever made by an American president, he declared that Republicans are, quote, semi-fascists. You're a fascist? The White House has since confirmed that Joe Biden meant what he said. So that is effectively a declaration of war against half the country. What do we do to fascists? Well, we fought a war to kill them. By the way, at the same moment that Biden is accusing Republicans of fascism, his DHS has published a cartoon on Facebook urging children to report their parents to federal authorities if their parents post something called COVID disinformation, because that's not Soviet or anything. What the hell is going on? Blake Masters is running for the United States Senate from Arizona to change this, when polling from the Trafalgar Group shows he's within 3 points of the incumbent in that state, Mark Kelly. Blake Masters joins us now. Blake, thanks so much for coming on. So the Biden administration is encouraging children to inform on their parents. How are they getting away with that?
Well, we're not going to let them get away with it, Tucker. We're going to punish them in November. But leave it to the left, right? They push the craziest stuff, and then they call us the extremists. My opponent in Arizona, Mark Kelly, that's his shtick. He pretends to be moderate, and then he says, oh, Blake is extreme. Blake is dangerous. You know what's extreme? You know what's dangerous? what's actually happening, what Mark Kelly and the rest of the Democrats are doing to our country. On Joe Biden's watch, the Dems have destroyed our economy. They've destroyed our border security. You know, crime is going through the roof. And Tucker, the schools, they're indoctrinating our kids. They're teaching boys to cut off their, my God, right? And now this latest thing, Biden's DHS, they're trying to recruit children to rat out their parents for questioning some official COVID narrative. This is straight from Mao's Cultural Revolution. This is Chinese Communist Party stuff. And it's Joe Biden, it's his sidekick Mark Kelly, these Democrats. They're the authoritarians. They're the ones behaving like fascists.
Well, by definition, if you're trying to separate children from their parents, break apart the family so you can have more control over the country, I mean, I think that's the definition of authoritarianism.
That's it. And Tucker, I'm so glad you said that. It all goes back to the Democrats trying to destroy the family. You know, whatever the issue is that the Dems are shrieking about today, maybe it's COVID, maybe it's climate change, maybe it's systemic racism. You know, ultimately their goal is to separate, to drive a wedge between children and their parents. For the left, it's about creating this new red guard, right? Training this new generation of activists who are going to go and try to erase our history and destroy our country. But we're not going to let them get away with it. Like, our kids do not belong to Joe Biden. Thank goodness. Right? And our kids don't belong to the government. We need to protect families. We need to help families. Only Republicans are going to do that. And it's why we have to have a great November. It's why we need to take back the U.S. Senate. It's why I'm going to beat Mark Kelly.
Some Republicans will do that, and I think you're one of them. So I appreciate coming on tonight. Blake Masters. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tucker.
So occasionally we ask on this show a sort of relevant question. What are they doing up in Canada? Not just sled dogs and Molson. No. It's Castro's Cuba. Trudeau has just announced a new initiative to spend millions of dollars on bisexual Inuit, among other groups that he doesn't appear to even be able to define. But it's an amazing piece of tape. You'll enjoy it, we promise. We'll be right back. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson's Happy Monday. As we've often noted on this show, because it's hard not to notice, we are living in one of those moments where so much is happening all at once, and information about it all is so tightly controlled that huge history-changing events can occur, and in fact are occurring right now, and nobody seems aware of them. It's pretty unsettling, actually. Here's one example. Europe is descending into poverty. Did you know that? Did someone told you that? So the most advanced continent on the planet, the birthplace of Western civilization, our civilization, is getting much poorer very quickly. It's moving backward at high speed. Just a year ago, Europe was a modern place. For example, the overwhelming majority of Europeans heated their homes with natural gas, as modern people do. In Germany, the continent's richest country, only about 6% of households, most of them rural, heated with cordwood. And you'd expect that, given that, again, Germany is a modern, industrialized country, with central heating and indoor plumbing and all the other trappings of a society that has moved beyond the medieval period. Last year, only about 6% of Germans used wood to heat their homes, but that has changed dramatically. Demand for firewood in Germany has risen so fast that there is none left to buy. You can't get it. So desperate Germans are now cutting their own wood, scouring the forest like their ancestors for sources of heat. Why?
Some in Germany are taking matters into their own hands, solutions that might look like a blast from the past. About 2 hours outside Berlin.
Okay.
It's mostly fruit.
Residents of this small town have turned to wood chips for fuel. We have to be innovative, said the project's organizer. If we don't act and just rely on the government to solve the crisis, we'll never succeed. This burner will soon fuel most of this village of 60 people.
So they call it biomass, but it's wood. They're burning wood, again, as they did during the feudal period. That's Germany. In Poland, families are standing in line for days to buy coal. Not in 1910, right now, tonight. Cars queued up outside coal mines, hoping for fuel. Quote, "This is beyond imagination," one 57-year-old Polish man told Reuters. People are sleeping in their cars. I remember the communist times, but it didn't cross my mind that we could return to something even worse. Oh, but it's come. Something even worse has arrived. The French government has announced energy rations this winter. Just the other day, France had so much energy that it exported it to other countries. It was a net exporter of energy. Now, there won't be enough heat in France for everyone in the country to stay warm. In the UK, 70% of restaurants are preparing to close, to go under. Why? Because when winter comes, they won't be able to afford to keep the heat and lights on, etc., etc. This is happening across Europe in every country. So the question is, why is it happening? And the answer is extremely simple. There's an energy shortage in Europe. Cheap energy is essential. It is the key to everything that a normal society strives for. Prosperity, safety, a longer life expectancy for its citizens. Everything depends on cheap energy, but Europe no longer has it. And as a result, things are falling apart very quickly. Energy costs in Europe are expected to increase by hundreds of percent in coming months. Germany's year-ahead price of electricity, that's the benchmark for all of Europe, it's measured in euros per megawatt hour. That price just exceeded 1,000 euros for the first time in history. For perspective, just a week ago, last Monday, the cost was about 700 euros per megawatt hour, and that was a record. In other words, the price rise is approaching 50% in a single week. In France, electricity went up 25% in one day. That was last Friday. Imagine that happening to you. Here's what Europe looks like tonight.
In Europe, it's lights out at major monuments and tourist attractions as a long, hot summer gives way to what officials worry could be a bitterly cold winter. Skyrocketing energy prices have put Europe on a war footing, with Russia as the enemy. We're in what can be described as a hybrid war, said French President Emmanuel Macron. Russia uses energy resources, like it does food, as a war weapon to exert pressure. Oil prices have doubled, coal prices have quadrupled, and natural gas...
Hey, Rosie, go play. We believe happy cows make better milk. There goes another one. Organic Valley, from outside with love.
Are you going to be able to talk on this? Or am I going to have to do all the talking?
Look for
So,
It's August 29th, 2022, and the top of the episode is election fraud stage set, must be done right according to the rule of law, provable in court. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, Trump says this, they have now set the stage for election fraud. Think about what Trump has been doing. Trump, he likes to follow the rule of law. He wants people to do the right thing. Actually, he gives people multiple chances to do the right thing. Most of the people will not do the right thing, but he wants it on record, saying, no, I gave you a chance, I gave you an out, but you didn't want to do it. And you can see it time and time again. And now, Trump is allowing the FBI to do the right thing, and he wants them to follow the rule of law. Now, is the FBI going to do this? Are the people in the FBI going to do this? Because here's what Trump is doing right now. Remember, we only have one chance at proving all this and doing it right. And the only way you can do it is to follow the rule of law and make sure you build a case that's completely irrefutable in the court of law. That's exactly what's happening right now. And a lot of people are saying, well, why is it taking so long? Why can't we just go in? Why didn't Bill Barr do something? Why didn't people do something? Well, think about what Merrick Garland is doing right now. Think about what Biden is doing. Actually, they projected all of that onto Trump where they thought Trump and Bill Barr were going to be doing all of this. Actually, they didn't do any of this. Why? Because the optics aren't right. That's not following the rule of law. See, what Biden and Merrick Garland and the FBI, what they're doing, they're working outside of the rule of law and actually caught them in their entire operation. But think about what Trump has been doing this entire time, and not just Trump, but all the people in this country who know there is election fraud. A little bit at a time, evidence is being produced all over the place, which is building an irrefutable case that will be presented to the courts. Now, people are probably saying, well, what happens if that doesn't work? What happens if the Supreme Court won't hear the case? What happens if they turn it down? What happens if it's too corrupt? We already know the plan. We already know it's going to be the military. We already know the military has it all. And we know they left the timing and the entire operation up to Trump on how he wanted to proceed. And to follow the rule of law and to build the cases and to show the American people and expose everything that they're doing, you need to follow the rule of law. It has to be done right. But yes, if it all doesn't work out, the military will be the only way. And this is exactly what Trump, the Patriots, are doing right now. They're building the case and they're trapping the FBI, the deep state players, the Department of Justice, and all the other criminals in a gigantic sting operation. They're allowing them to do what they do best, destroy themselves. Because now they're operating outside of the rule of law. And people can see this very clearly. Trump, he's going to be following the rule of law, and he's going to show through certain proceedings and court documents that the FBI, Department of Justice, the puppet masters, they are working outside of the rule of law, and it is a political active Trump and rule of law coming after no, they were going to fight back like never before. Remember, their entire MO was to back to what they were trying to do from the very beginning. Trump was in office during the pandemic. What did they try to do? They wanted a civil war. Why? There were riots all over the country. They wanted the Trump supporters to get involved. They wanted to cause chaos. What do you think happened during January 6th? They tried to use the same exact playbook. They said, oh great, all the Trump supporters are all in one place, and what we'll do is we'll kick it off. We'll have the Antifa there, we'll have Neil there, we'll have BLM there, we'll construct the Capitol Police do, we have the FBI informant, and we'll make it look like, wow, they're breaking windows, they're knocking down things, and the Trump supporters are none of this happened. The only people that were violent was Antifa, BLM, and the rest. Yes, you might have had a little here and there that were spread around, but there were no weapons or anything like that. But their entire mission completely failed on it. Are they going to try to do it once again? I do believe so. I do believe that this is going to happen. I do believe Trump, he recruits something to kind of bait them in. Remember, Trump has always been the bait. And he's always making the deep state players, the fake news, big tech, puppet masters, do exactly what he wants. And if you're the bait, you can bring them down a certain path. And I do believe this is exactly what Trump has been doing. I think they baited them in to Mar-a-Lago. They knew exactly what was there, but they wanted the other information because they didn't see the information that they needed. And I do believe there were plans that kind of set things off, which we discussed yesterday. And now we can see that with Zuckerberg admitting that the FBI got in touch with him to say, hey, the Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinformation, well, that's the topper on the cake right now. And Trump, he's saying, wait a minute, the FBI was involved in this? They manipulated the elections? But they had the Hunter Biden laptop. They knew it wasn't Russian disinformation. They knew exactly what it was. Actually, there was a prosecutor working on the case. They knew exactly what it was. And now we have the FBI involved in manipulating the election. Think about what's happening. The case is building and building and building. And yes, we're going to see a lot more come out of this. And we're going to be talking all about this a little bit later. But first, let's talk about Biden and Charlie Crist, who's running for governor in Florida. Doesn't have a chance. Remember, everyone needs to vote. That's very, very important. But these people are doing the same exact thing that Hillary Clinton did. And this didn't work out too well for them. Remember, we're all Americans in this country. Yes, you might have a different party that you follow. You might be a different race. But we're all Americans here. And these individuals, these deep state criminal people, they do the same exact thing because they hate us. See, they hate the people that are patriots, that love America, love the Constitution, that love our founding fathers and what they created here. They hate that we stand behind the Constitution. So what do they call all of those people? And yes, Trump stands behind those people. And yes, we're part of the MAGA movement. We're part of Make America Great Again. They hate all of us. They can't stand us. They can't stand the sight of us because we're disrupting their entire agenda. So what do they end up calling us? They start to call us names. Biden is out there, and he's calling the MAGA people semi-fascist. I mean, really think about this for a second. Think about all the different names that they have called us. They've called us deplorable. They called us Neanderthal, clinging to Bibles and guns, chump, spineless coward, semi-fascist, and don't forget, insurrectionists and domestic terrorists. They are calling the American people names. Remember, these people, and we know they're not, they're supposed to be our elected leaders. They're supposed to be working for we the people. And these people are calling us names? That tells you that these people are not elected leaders. An elected leader, no matter what side you're on, would never, ever call people names. The reason why they're calling people names is because they're part of the criminal syndicate and they were installed in their position. They don't believe in the electoral process. They don't believe in the Constitution. They don't believe any of this. And this is why they resort to name-calling in the end. Actually, if you listen and you follow the people out on the streets like Antifa and all the other people out there that are pushing the agendas, when you start using what do they start to do? They start to call people names, and they start to scream. If you actually look at the criminal syndicate, when they say deplorable, Neanderthal, clinging to Bibles and guns, chumps, violent, they're doing the same exact thing. They're the same exact people. They are criminals, and they have criminals on the streets pushing their agenda. That is Antifa, that is BLM, and they release the criminals. And yes, they want illegals involved in this because that builds their numbers. Now, what's very interesting is we know the borders are completely wide open, and we know what is happening down there. Remember, Trump, he built a wall to stop human trafficking, child trafficking, MS-13 gangs, and every other criminal that comes across the border. And I do believe he didn't finish it on purpose because he wanted the people of this country to see the true agenda of the puppet masters of Biden administration. But like we said, moving all these children around the country, this is actually child trafficking. Actually, Stephen Miller, he put this out on Twitter, he said the following: these astronomical numbers defy any historical comparison. So overwhelmingly are the prior records exceeded that there is no reference point. Biden, with the unflinching aid of 50 Senate Democrats, is running the largest child smuggling operation our world has ever seen. And what does he mean by that? Well, so far we have about 250,000 illegal migrant minors in cities around the nation. Yes, what you're watching right now, you're watching human trafficking, child trafficking, and everything else come across the borders. They're doing it in broad daylight so everyone can see this. And people are seeing this, and people are starting to understand exactly what's going on. And people are also seeing what's going on in Afghanistan, what's going on in Iraq and Ukraine and many other places around the world. Remember, this is a one-year anniversary of what happened in Afghanistan, where Biden got 13 soldiers killed, left billions of dollars worth of equipment for the Taliban, and actually decided to rescue the deep state players there and bring them to America, and left the American people in Afghanistan, and there are still thousands of Americans still in Afghanistan. Isn't that amazing? But what we're seeing today on the anniversary of all of that is out in Iraq, the bad guys. U.S. Embassy employees, they've been evacuated. Al-Shabaab, it used to be Al-Qaeda. They use this to basically get the country completely off balance with some type of revolution to overthrow the government of that country. They did it in Ukraine, they tried to do it in Syria, they did it in Iraq and Lebanon and all the rest. Yes, the military was also involved. So they used the foot soldiers to create the unstable environment to overthrow the government. Once the government is overthrown, they have an election. And the election is completely manipulated, and they put the puppet into place. Then, anyone that goes up against the puppet that is in the leadership role, they call them Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, whatever terrorist group. And they're allowed to drone strike them in those countries. Think about what happened in this country. We had an election that was manipulated by retail players in foreign entities. They overthrew the government and they put in a puppet regime. Anyone that goes up against the puppet regime, what are they called? Oh wait, domestic terrorists. Or they have many other names, deplorable and the rest, but mostly it's white supremacists, domestic terrorists, and so forth and so on. Now, the people of these countries are fighting back and taking back their countries. And it's getting worse and worse throughout the Middle East. And I do believe we're going to see a lot of countries start to fall and the people are going to take back control. Actually, that's really what happened out in Afghanistan. The people, the Taliban, actually took back their country. Trump made a huge deal of that. And I do believe this is happening all across the Middle East right now. And you can actually see the people inside the presidential palace. They were using the pool, and we can see that this is happening more and more throughout all these different countries. And I think it's going to continue as time goes on. And remember, the optics are very, very good because who's in control of all of them? Oh, that's right, the president. The whole thing is completely falling apart on him right now. Just like the pandemic. This is falling apart, but they're trying to bring it back as best they can. Out in Germany, masks are now compulsory again on German government planes after public outcry about maskless Schultz, Habeck, and journalists on the flight to Canada. So they weren't wearing masks, and the people were calling them out on it, and now they're saying, well, masks are back now. I mean, really think about this for a second. What's the science behind this? There is no science. What do the deep state players want? What does the criminal syndicate want? They just want control. I mean, take, for example, Biden. Pentagon's great, put this out on Telegram. You have Biden wearing his mask all over the place. Comes out with the helicopter with his mask, goes on the plane with a mask, walking alone around the White House with a mask on. Makes no sense whatsoever. We know that masks don't work. Because if they work, the lawsuit from the CDC and everything else would be moving forward, and they'd be pushing, showing scientific evidence, showing that masks work. Remember, they're not the ones who decided to put the mask on the plane. When is he dead on the plane? That tells you. But then, you see Biden at a party, surrounded by people, shoulder to shoulder, and there's no mask whatsoever. Does that make any sense? No, of course not. I think people see this very, very clearly now. The same thing with the death jab. Right now, the Food and Drug Administration is expected to approve new COVID-19 booster shots this week before the vaccines are tested on humans. So they're not going to finish any testing. They're going to say, we're ready to go, and don't worry about it. It's safe and effective, just like all the other death jabs. But then why do we have sudden deaths? Why do we have myocarditis? Why are we seeing this all around the world? And why are people that get this death jab, why do they keep getting COVID? Why all the leaders keep getting COVID if they have 2, 3, 4 death jabs? I mean, really think about this for a second. And we know that they're trying to go after Trump with all this, but remember, he wasn't really involved in the creation. Remember, they didn't just create mRNA technology in a couple of months. This has been going on for a very long time in Big Pharma. They just decided to use it during the pandemic because they thought, wow, Our entire agenda is coming true. We're going to be able to vaccinate everyone, get them on the vaccine passport, and we'll keep making them take boosters, and we'll kill off the population, make them ill, and we'll have total and utter control for the Great Reset and the Green New Deal. That's what they were trying to do. So that technology was developed a while ago. They have patents that were out there showing that they were working on it. But who pushed this on the people? Wasn't it the WHO? Wasn't it Fauci? Wasn't it the FDA? Wasn't it the CDC? Didn't the residents say it's mandatory? Didn't it force people to take something that's experimental? Their entire push to get Trump is going to backfire. Over Patriot Politics Research put this out on True Social Psychology. And who at the NIH approves vaccines? Christine Grady, PhD Department Chief of the NIH Clinical Center of Bioethics. And who is she? She's the wife of Fauci. So he's the NIAID director. She's the NIH Bioethics Department chief. And she approves vaccines. He pushes vaccines. Really, you can't make this stuff up. It's unbelievable. And it's all falling apart around them. If you notice, the CDC keeps backtracking on all their guidances because the people aren't buying what they're selling. Yes, the other nations, they can continually push this, but the people are not going to take it anymore. The people see the truth because it's been a long time right now, and people see, hey, people didn't die on the plane. Actually, everyone's perfectly healthy. You're not wearing a mask, you're perfectly healthy. The millions of people that weren't vaccinated, they didn't die off. There's no super spreaders. Actually, the people that got the death jab, they seem to be having problems. And we're seeing those countries that force the death jab on people, those countries are having problems with more sicknesses, more people being ill, more deaths, and people getting COVID. People now are seeing the truth of everything that they tried to do. And yes, in the end, this is all going to turn on them. Just like their entire 16-year plan. Remember, their plan was to push us into a war. And I just want to review this for a sec because you can see this is where they're trying to get back to. This is why they are pushing so hard, because they needed a war, because that is their cover story. They needed a war to get rid of the Constitution. They needed this to move forward with their plan. They were robbed of all this. They never expected her to lose. I'm talking about Hillary Clinton. Keith Stradamus put this out on True Social Psychology. Let's look at the big picture, Q Post 570. Obama put USA in position. Hillary was meant to be the executioner. She would have thrown us into World War III. They would have rewritten the Constitution, the Second Amendment, disarmed the people, take away basic freedoms, lethal global pandemics, mass depopulation, mass scare events, false flags. Christians and patriots would be the #1 target. The New World Order end goal was they would become gods of a world they created. They never thought she would lose. And that's what happened. The patriots intervened. They stopped her in 2016. They put them way behind schedule. They took away the endless war, they took away the war with North Korea. That's why Trump made a deal with Kim Jong-un, became friends with him, walked across the DMZ because he shut it all down. The war was actually supposed to start with North Korea, with a nuclear weapon. The war was going to be controlled. The war was going to actually allow the United States to lose so they could take over the United States and remove the Constitution. They all were fighting like they never fought before to get back to where they were. They're never going to win. They're never going to win. It's backfiring, and it's a agenda. And everything that they did with Mar-a-Lago is going to backfire. Actually, it is backfiring on them. And I do believe Trump has caught them in a trap. Mike Davis put this out on True Social Psychology. Legal nonsense. Trump lawfully declassified his records, so there goes an espionage charge. Who committed espionage? The deep state players, when they took the privileged documents that they are not allowed to look at because they do not have clearance. And was this documentation pushed to other individuals that do not have clearance? Number two, he lawfully kept his personal copy, so there goes charges related to government property. Number three, he couldn't obstruct investigations into these non-crimes. He's absolutely right. And the FBI has just confirmed that they seized privileged documents in the raid on Mar-a-Lago. In a court filing on Monday, federal prosecutor said that the invasive FBI search had turned up a limited number of such documents. It is unclear what unlimited really means. Why to turn them privileged? Actually sought. Now this development actually provides further evidence to the judge that a special So let's get this straight. They already reviewed the documents. So they reviewed documents that most likely they didn't have clearance to review. And who else saw these documents? That's very interesting. Bruno Barking, she put this out on Telegram, and it says the following. And she's pointing to a post, and in this post, and by the way, it's post 4815. This is October 6, 2020. And this is a tweet within that post. This is from Trump, and this is from October 6, 2020. And it says, I fully authorize the total declassification of any and all documents pertaining to the single greatest political crime in American history. The Russia hoax, likewise the Hillary Clinton email scandal, no redaction. So he let everyone know that he did this. And then she said at the bottom, she said, sometimes it's good to sit back and ask, like any good journalist, some questions to Trump raised. What was this declassified material, R.E. Russiagate, and Hillary's emails? How were the documents taken? Seized from a skiff while Trump was absent to protect Jane's custody? The use of the documents revealed may have been treason. When were the documents classified? In 2025 Trump. Where were the documents supposed to be classified? Why are they now redacted or classified? How will we know documents are unaltered and true? The docs map what's called and Hunter Biden's laptops? You're welcome. Absolutely. So, well, we show the declassification, we show the documents, and if it turns up some other place, and it's an exact match, that proves everything, doesn't it? And I think this is exactly what we're going to see. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is that we can see the push from the fake news. They're already pushing, and this is coming from the New York Times, saying that Trump must be indicted from what we are seeing today. And it seems that Trump, once again, most likely is bringing state players down a path where he wants to go. And what I find very interesting is that Antifa, they're changing things up right now. Now, normally Antifa, you see them with a skateboard, you see them with bats or shields or poles, things like that, or maybe water bottles filled with ice or something like that. That's what they normally use as a weapon. Now, we're starting to see things change because out in Texas, we see Antifa showed up to a drag show, and now they're carrying AR-15s. So now they're coming armed to certain events, and this is Antifa now armed with AR-15s. So to me, it seems like they're changing things up right now, and why would they be carrying AR-15s? Just think about that for a second. Then think of the New York Times where they said, we must indict Trump on these charges that happened in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, these are all made-up charges. None of them are going to stick. Actually, what's going to happen is the fallout's going to be the actual opposite. It's going to be on the FBI, Department of Justice, and everything else. But what I do believe here is that they already knew this. They already knew that whatever they got, whatever they were trying to do was completely against the rule of law. This wasn't going to fly, and it was going to backfire. But I don't think that was their main objective. I still think their main objective, and we can see from the New York Times, indict Trump, indict Trump, indict Trump. They want Trump indicted. Why? Because they're trying to get his base, and they know his base is very, very large. Remember, Biden didn't win 81 million votes. He got 81 million legal ballots, because if he actually got 81 million votes, they wouldn't be coming after Trump so hard. They wouldn't be coming after all the people who support him so hard, because he got 81 million votes. But if they used 81 million illegal ballots, yes, they will be worried about the person that got 81 million votes and the people are backing him. So why do they want to indict Trump? Do they actually have anything on Trump? No. Why are they hiding the affidavit? Because I do believe they're going to be using this to indict him. I do believe Merrick Garland, at the right moment, he's going to do this. Why? Because we have the midterms coming up. Why? Because Trump has everything on it. How do they create noise? They use riots. They use communication blackouts. And Trump, he did something very, very interesting. He retweeted an interview with Gowdy and Graham. And in this interview, Lindsey Graham, said something very interesting. He said if they indict Trump, you're going to see riots across the country. Take a listen.
Well, you had a really good high-minded discussion with your last guest. I'm just going to get really to the bottom of all of this. Most Republicans, including me, believe when it comes to Trump, there is no law. It's all about getting him. There's a double standard when it comes to Trump. What happened with Hunter Biden is that the FBI weighed in to make sure a story didn't break before the 2020 election. We now have whistleblowers at the FBI telling Senator Grassley that they were told to slow down and back off Hunter Biden. And I'll say this, the federal prosecution of Donald Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, which you presided over and did a hell of a good job, there'll be riots in the streets.
Now, let's put this all in perspective. Do you really think the Trump supporters, do you think they're going to riot in all the different cities? Why would a patriot destroy their own businesses, their own country? They wouldn't. Just like during the time of the colonists. The British are coming. If they try something, the colonists, they're going to burn down their own buildings, they're going to loot their own stores, and destroy their farms. They would never do that. You see, Antifa does this because they bust their names from other places. That's not their home. They don't care about that. They don't care about America. The Patriots would never do that. They would never go out and riot like that. Because they love America. They love their community. So what are they doing here? I do believe they're setting them up once again. Now think of Antifa now carrying AR-15s. What happens if those same Antifa people dress up in MAGA hats and MAGA shirts and carry an American flag with an AR-15 around their neck? Are people going to think they're Trump supporters? Are they trying to get the Antifa soldiers, the criminals, BLM and the rest, out into the open? I'm talking about the Patriots. Are they trying to coax them out from the shadows and into the light where they can be round up very easily? Remember, the mapping of Antifa has started a long time ago. They know who they report to. They're just not doing it on their own. Oh, it's just people out there that just are doing the same thing all across the country. That's completely impossible. So I do believe he's setting them up. Are these going to be Trump supporters? I do not believe so. I do believe it's going to be people that are dressed up to make people think that the Trump supporters are angry. And I think this is one of their main objectives. Why? Because they know the information that Trump has. They know that the election fraud, it's going to be produced. Remember, the other day, and that was yesterday, we mentioned how Zuckerberg actually admitted that the FBI told him to shut down any information that had to do with the Hunter Biden laptop. Now remember,